Well, as always, we definitely want to say thank you. Give a huge shout out to our amazing sponsors, our presenting sponsors you see on the screen here. Without you, we certainly could not keep this conversation going as long as we have, as lively as we do, and to attract our amazing guest. Julia Patrick is the CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. Good morning to you.
Good morning. I'm coming to you from my office in our studio.
Sneak peek.
This is the hovel with which I work from.
I love it. I love it. And I'm Jarrett Ransom, your nonprofit nerd, CEO of the Raven Group. And I'm actually coming to you from Durango, Colorado today, but you can't tell because I've got the amazing backdrop behind me. And I am so excited to introduce all of you and to welcome our guest for the day, Dr. Rob Harter. And Rob, welcome. Good morning. You are someone, as you know, I've definitely followed your organization, Christian Center of Park City. So in Park City, Utah, I've fallen in love with your town there. And just as I do whenever I travel, I like to nerd out over nonprofits. And yours has definitely caught my attention and my heart. And I have just loved watching you grow as an individual, but also the organization and how you reimagine your programs and your services, realizing that Park City is a really different demographic. And I have been just amazed at how you provide and pivot well before the pandemic, if you will, really to make sure that you're providing the support for your community and everything that's needed. So welcome to you, Rob. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. No, it's great to see both of you on the screen here, and thanks for welcoming me on the show. I'm super excited to be on the show.
Yeah.
Well, it's quite different when you're in the hot seat. I know you have this amazing podcast.
Yeah, it's great. I'm on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of weird, isn't it?
It is actually reversal of roles.
Yeah, it really is. So let's start by asking you to explain what CCPC is. I mean, it's really an innovative thing, and there's so much that you're doing. There's so many things that I think you can bring to the conversation. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things, but I thought this might be a good starting place.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. And yeah, real quickly, a quick summary. We are a humanitarian community center. We started 20 years ago, so this is our 20th anniversary. So it's kind of fun. If you do follow our nonprofit, we're celebrating 20 years. And I've been the executive director for 10 years. So we had an executive director before me who was here for 10 years. So ironically, we've both been here for 10 years. And it is an organization, really our goal is to meet people right at their point of need. And so whatever that need may be. And so we have 2 food pantries, we have 3 thrift stores, we have a whole myriad of programs and services that serve this community. Now, a lot of people probably have heard of Park City and know about Park City a bit in that there's a lot of people that have second homes here. It's a wonderful place to have a second home because of all the ski and winter opportunities here. But also in the summer, a lot of people that stay here stay because the summer is so beautiful. The weather's perfect. There's mountain biking and rock climbing and just all kinds of activities. There's reservoirs where you can have your boat. So you've got this interesting dynamic between people that have a lot of money, that have a second home here, and then you've got this working class that keep the restaurants going and the hotels going and the resorts going and all those things. And they tend to be, in general, low income. Just to give a couple of stats for the listeners. So for Park City School District, as an example, in the schools, 20% of the kids qualify for free and reduced lunch. And that's a federal standard for poverty. And so that's where they land in that group. And that's part of the group that we serve a lot of our programs towards, whether it be our food pantry. Again, we provide free clothes. We have all kinds of different activities for the kids here that go to school to make sure they start the year off right. We just had this program called Back to School Basics, which was really fun. But then we've also expanded into other areas. For example, we have this now state-of-the-art mental health counseling center. In fact, we now have, it's just grown tremendously in the last few years. We have 14 licensed therapists that are served on our mental health counseling team. And so we do a whole variety from child therapy to marriage therapy to, we have a nutritionist on staff. We have lots of specialization, a psychiatrist, what's an APRN technically, but someone who can manage medication. And then we also have a psychologist on staff and everything in between. And we have it in Spanish and in English. We have a scholarship fund. So what's nice about that is that it provides a lot of different resources for people across our demographics. So a lot of our programs, as I mentioned, really target low-income individuals and families, but our counseling actually reaches the entire gamut. So we'll have multimillionaires that come for counseling, and everybody in between. We work with homeless. Oftentimes, mental health is at the root of homelessness, and although Park City has nothing homeless issue like Phoenix or LA or even Salt Lake, but we do have homeless, and almost all the homeless in Park City come to our organization because we're the primary organization that serves the homeless population here in Wasatch and Summit County. So that's just a real quick summary. We love what we do. I love what I get to do, and it's a great organization.
Well, and I love your thrift store. I've only been to one of them, so now you're telling me there's two more I need to find.
Yeah, exactly. See, you've only been to two. Yeah. Yeah. So we have kind of specialization. We have our thrift store that has a lot of like special recreation equipment, and everything's $1 or $2.
Yeah.
Then the boutique, I think, is where you went, where you get some really nice items. And this may be fun for those who are listening or really into thrifting, because you have so many nice things and people that have lots of, things to donate. We do have, a lot of people that live here that have their second homes here, and you would know their names, Hollywood actors and very well known businessmen and women, and they donate these incredible things. So we have Prada boots, we'll have Armani suits, we'll have just really nice things that are donated to this boutique, not your normal boutique. And then the final one is in Heber. So you want to travel over to Heber, about 20 minutes from Park City, and that's where our furniture is. We get some wonderful, really large furniture. You can imagine some of these homes, they'll get a new owner and they'll get rid of all the furniture, but it's in beautiful shape. It's gorgeous furniture, but they want to remodel it and maybe update it and things like that. So they'll donate it to us. So we get these incredible furniture pieces. And that's typically at our Heber thrift store. So,
yeah. Well, talk to us a little bit. I would love for you to tell us about this pandemic. Like, how have you reimagined what you're providing the community? What have you seen your particular community need during these times since March? I know that you also have a lot of seasonal workers that come in from all over the world to get some, hospitality industry at this amazing resorts there in Park City, Utah. But how have you seen this pandemic really, change the community needs?
That is a great question. It definitely, I think you said it earlier in the intro of the show. Luckily, we had a lot of our humanitarian services in place. So we had our 2 food pantries. We actually just finished a major building project. We had a over $8 million building project that we just had finished. And so we were ready to go. And I'm really glad on the timing of that. Of course, we couldn't control the timing, but it was just worked out perfectly because we were set, ready to go. And yes, it really impacted our community right away. Park City and even the surrounding area where Heber is, we're very driven by the resort community. Therefore, we are very much a tourist-driven economy. And so when the COVID hit, everyone canceled their reservations. No one was skiing. The ski resorts closed. And therefore, we had this huge swath of people that immediately lost their jobs. And so they weren't sure if they could pay the rent. They may get evicted. They didn't have food. I mean, you just go down the list. And so a lot of our programs kicked into place. And so for us anyway, in Park City, because I know it was a little different state by state, but for us, the COVID-19 really hit in March 15th when the schools were declared going to be closed, and the resorts pretty much closed down right away. So we went into a mode where we just focused on 3 primary services and shifted all of our staff. We have over 50 staff. And so we just put them all primarily into 3 areas: our mental health counseling, our food pantry, and then our rent assistance. It's called our basic needs assistance program. So anybody who couldn't afford rent or couldn't afford their power bill or their water bill, they would apply for this. Again, a program we've had before, but we had over 800 families that we've been able to help during COVID that needed rent assistance or bills assistance. And just to give you some numbers, now that we look back, it's been 5 months since that started, we've been able to give nearly $1 million away over the last 5 months. So there's been a huge outflow. But honestly, I give credit to this community. We wouldn't have the resources to give if it wasn't for this community. So the community responded, they rallied, they gave the money, they turned right around and gave it out so people wouldn't be evicted and people would be able to pay their bills, their water would stay on, et cetera.
So how does that work when you think about, a transient community where, if you have to imagine that a lot of your second home owners or fourth home owners, whatever that might be, because it is such an affluent, demographic, they couldn't get into the community, right? So they wouldn't be necessarily hearing about what you were doing or maybe even understanding what you were doing. So how did you bridge that path?
Well, that's a really good question. I think partly there was a lot of people that already were here kind of before and as the pandemic hit. We also had, we'd heard a lot of people that say they left New York or LA when it first hit. They weren't sure what was going to happen. So they came to their home in Park City to kind of hunker down and just see what was going to happen. So they were around. But honestly, besides that, even if they weren't here, the nice thing is I think we've built a really good social media base. We've got a great email base. And so when we were communicating through email and through our social media primarily and our website, people found out about it. And I think the other benefit was those who did, for whatever reason, were hanging out here in Park City during the COVID-19, they wanted to do something. And this turned into their local community. And this is the place where they wanted to give money and support what was going on. And I think a lot of people that do have second homes here, they're very aware that the resort closed right away. They're very aware their favorite restaurant shut down. And I didn't think it took too long to realize, hey, wait a second, what are the people that worked at those restaurants, at the resort, at the hotels? We need to support them. And what organization is doing that? Well, it's our organization. So we just thank the community that they did respond. They did listen. They responded to our emails. They responded to our social media posts. And so we're able to get some great response right off the bat.
Yeah.
So now I want to switch gears just a little bit, because you're a very interesting individual, and that in many ways you're like us. You get to see all these things going on, but you've taken it a step further and you've launched a podcast. And so I'd really like to have you kind of share with us what you're seeing, what's going on, what are people talking about. It's called the Nonprofit Leadership Podcast.
Right.
And your archive can be found at nonprofitleadershippodcast.com.
.org.
Is that right?
I think either one will
.org.
get you there,
Okay,
but .org
sorry.
is technically, yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah, I'm glad you
talk
asked. Mm-hmm.
to us about what people are saying about leadership. Like, what is it that you're hearing?
Boy, that is a really good question. I'm so glad you asked it, because I think, all the guests I've had on the show, that always pops up, and well, obviously the podcast is dedicated to leadership, so that helps. So we're already kind of set up for that. And I pick selected guests that want to talk about leadership. But I think a couple of things I'll say is, number one, I think with nonprofit leadership specifically right now, I think the beauty of the nonprofit sector is that we can be nimble. We can change pretty quickly. Hopefully now there's some really large nonprofits out there that it's a little bit more difficult, but in general, the nonprofit sector can be really nimble, say in comparison to government. So we can kind of change on a dime, if you will, to adjust to the needs of the community. And so I've had conversations where the nonprofits that are really thriving right now are those nonprofits that were able to make quick changes and to adjust to the need in their community. And that, I think, has really been a key thing that I've learned from COVID-19 is hopefully we always remain nimble enough to respond to whatever that need would be, and not just keep plowing ahead to do a program because we've done it for the last 20 years, we'll just keep doing it. No, like, what are the needs? Stay attuned to the community and adjust your programs and services based on the needs that are presenting themselves, because we're certainly living in a world where things are changing all the time. Now, COVID was a major change, but on the heels of that was the racial injustice, that we've seen, and all the protests and a lot of the conversations that have come alongside that. So there's a lot of things changing. So leadership that's nimble, leadership that can make change quickly, can make decisions quickly, smart decisions, not just, reacting, but like making smart, wise decisions, but making them quickly. So if your organization has a hard time making decisions, or if your organization that's slow to respond and make changes, that's probably been a struggle the last 5 months, because so much is changing around us.
You are preaching to the choir, Rob.
I bet, yeah.
It.
You two are doing it, yeah.
Yeah, and so much of that, right, is just, and I've said several times, so those of you that are raving fans of ours and have watched several of these episodes, our sector, the nonprofit sector, has really been due for a shakeup, I believe. And the nonprofit sector is really hesitant to take risks, right? Because, what is the return on investment? How can we guarantee that we are stewarding our donors' money properly? We don't know what this risk could take, but we've all been challenged, right, during this time, and forced to take risks that maybe we would have never taken before. We weren't comfortable taking it. We weren't familiar with the path, but holy cow, right? Has the pandemic really said, we've got you. It's time for you to do some changing.
Exactly.
Uh,
It's interesting because I think you're right about how do we navigate change. I mean, as human beings, oftentimes, we really work towards being consistent, and change is not easy. And then you look at leadership, and it's frightening when you're in that boat with your own family, with your labor, with your donors, with your clients, trying to figure that out. And so I'd love to explore a little bit about what have you seen in changes in leadership. Are you finding that people are more compassionate, less compassionate, more direct? I mean, have you seen kind of a tenor or a cadence shift, if you will, in the leaders that you've been working with and talking with?
Yeah, I think that's another good question on how COVID has impacted nonprofit leaders. And I think when it comes to like leaders of organizations, I think I've seen a couple different responses. At first, I think, and still for some, there was a real panic because what I've seen anyway, like for example, I'm on the board. In fact, I'm the chair for the Utah Nonprofit Association here that serves the whole state of Utah. So it serves all the nonprofits in the state. And we did a survey about 2 months ago. And what we found from that was 26% of the respondents told us that they may not make it to the end of the year. 26%, so almost 30% of the nonprofits in this state feel like they may have to close their doors because the money dropped immediately. The donors just didn't have the money to give. Grants fell, dried up. I mean, you name it. And so there was a real panic. And so there was a real fear that gripped, I think, a lot of leaders, like, what do I do just to survive? So like that was kind of one response. Once you get through that, I think then you start saying, okay, leadership, we've got to make quick decisions, as we mentioned before. You have to be nimble. But I think the other positive thing that did come out of this is let's be collaborative. Let's
yes.
work with other nonprofits. Let's figure out what we can continue to do to stay within our mission, but let's work with other nonprofits because we cannot do this alone. I think this pandemic has really, really shown that we need each other. And then thirdly, I would say they've been very, I think the ones that have really moved through this successfully have been really good at communicating to their donors, because I think donors too are like, okay, they're a little bit afraid. What about their income? What about the stock market? It's been up and down, and can I keep giving at the same level? Or maybe they, are wondering where do they want to give their money? And so communication to donors has become so critical. So good leaders, I think, have figured out how do I communicate often and early to just make sure your donors are well informed of what's going on, what you're doing to respond to COVID, how you're doing as an organization, how you're doing even personally. One thing is, I guess, kind of a side note, but I think because we were talking earlier before the show, just there's a lot of blending right now between personal life and work life. And I think because this pandemic has hit so many of us very personally, I think it's been okay to share a bit more personally about your life and not just about goals and work and what you're doing and accomplishing your tasks. So I think even donors are okay with that, to say, how are you doing, Rob? Like, how's your staff doing? That's okay to talk about, because I think the more you can communicate, number one, you become more real, but number two, it just shows that you're attuned to what's going on, and you're attuned to your staff, and you're attuned to your community. And so I think communications become so important for leaders now to make sure they're clearly communicating what's going on and what their needs are.
Yeah, and we talk about too a lot of the return on relationship. So not just return on investment, but really having those authentic conversations. I've seen some amazing posts from some really big organizations across the nation that are showing their employees sitting at home on the couch working with their dog by their side, or and it's like,
right.
Wow, look at this human element. And that draws me closer to the organization, I think, definitely for me. And I just think, wow, what a great opportunity for us to take it to that next level. Julie, I see we have a question here for Rob. Is that you want to?
You know what? So you're going to have to ask that, because
Yeah,
it's not coming up on mine.
So one of our guests has asked here, Rob, specifically, that they are interested to know more about your board of directors, their level of involvement in all areas, particularly governance and fundraising. So how has their involvement impacted the growth of your organization?
Well, what a good question. Board of directors are so important, right? Everybody in the nonprofit sector knows that critical role the board plays. I feel honestly so lucky. I have an amazing board that from day one, before the COVID-19 crisis, they've been very supportive. I feel like they've found that right balance between providing oversight, direction, insight, discernment, and guidance, but not meddling into the day in and day out micromanagement of what I do. You know, I've heard my board chair tell me this and other board members, hey, Rob, we've hired you as executive director. We trust you're going to make the good decisions. You're going to hire, you'll fire, keep us informed. Obviously, keep well communicated to us, but we trust you, you know, and if there's a problem, we'll let you know. And so, you know, certainly there's things where they'll hear about things or someone will come to them with something and they'll come right to me and they'll ask questions. So I do feel very lucky. So to the question, yes, they've been very involved in all aspects. Now, I will say this, there's some that have more time than others. We have some board members that are very involved. I have one board member that comes every Wednesday and works in our food pantry. And this guy made lots of money at his corporate job, and he is out there cleaning out egg cartons that have been broken eggs have fallen into these cartons as we picked up the food from the local, you know, grocery store for a food pantry, and he's cleaning them out. Like, he's got this incredible heart just to serve. And so he's here every week. And so I'm able to connect with him on a regular basis. Others, they live in another state and they just come here occasionally. They have a second home here. So it's much more communication through phone, through Zoom, through email. So it's a mix for sure. Some board members love to get involved on the hands-on level, and they're rolling their sleeves up and they live here locally, and they've jumped into our programs. Our Back to School Basics program, for example, we just had last week. They'll show up and volunteer for that. Our Operation Hope, which is a toy store we provide for local families here, they'll show up and volunteer there. And then there's others that really come and they're willing to grab a coffee with me or grab lunch or dinner, and it's just me pounding them with questions. Give me some advice. Help me out with this one. Here's a sticky issue I'm dealing with. Help me out with that. So that's how they've supported, and certainly they have been so generous. I mean, certainly our founders, Jim and Susan Swartz, they founded this organization. They really had the vision initially for our humanitarian organization. So they were the first investors, if you will, in this nonprofit, and they continue to support us very generously. And I think one of the best things, as nonprofit leaders know, the more you get your board engaged, whatever level, again, it could be through in more of a mentoring way or on a hands-on working in your food pantry or whatever you offer to them. Either way, as long as they're engaged at a level that's meaningful to them, they'll typically, their money will follow their involvement and their engagement. And so we've had a great board, and they're very involved and they're very supportive. So I feel really lucky, because I know that's not the case for everybody. Again, I'm on the UNA board, and I bump into nonprofit leaders all the time that struggle with their board. So
how many board members do you have?
Yeah, so right now we have 16 board members.
Okay.
And we've kind
Do you
of
have an emeritus board, or do you have any other like support boards, like a youth board or any of that?
Yeah, good question. You know, right now we have a board of advisors. So we have the governing board, which is the 16, and then we have a board of advisors. And we just did that this past year. And it's interesting you asked that, because we've been debating about that. Do we extend our board? Or one of the things we're actually trying to do is provide more diversity and inclusion with our board. And I know that's a real process. You want to make sure you're really intentional with that. And so our board of advisors has allowed us, that's one way we've done that. And so that's been really nice to have an extended board of advisors now. And then one last thing I'll just say is we've had these little subcommittees. We break it into, you know, compensation committee. We've had we call it the mission committee, keeping us on mission. We have, because our counseling is such a big program within our overall organization, we actually have a committee dedicated to our counseling center. So we have board members that make that up. It's our 20th anniversary. So we have a few board members on our 20th anniversary board committee, which will be a, you know, short time limited committee. So that's how we've organized them and got them involved by joining a committee that really means something to them.
Mm-hmm. And then same guest wants to know, do you have any former clients that serve on your board, or have you considered that placement?
I love that idea. That's the kind of thing we're moving towards. We'd like to move towards. We don't right now, and really I wish we would. Now, having said that, we do have staff members that have been clients. In fact, we have several that we served, and they really needed our services, and they came around, and most of them came and volunteered first, and then we hired them. We just hired recently another staff person that when they first moved to town, they really needed our services, all of them. And once she graduated from high school and she graduated from college, then she was looking for a job, and sure enough, she applied, because she always wanted to kind of give back, and she remembered how much we served her when she was in real need, and now she's on our staff. So we love doing that, but that would be a next level step. We'd love to get some people on our board that have received our services. That would be a wonderful thing. It's a good question.
Amazing. You know, our time is almost up, which is like shocking. And you're so fascinating, Rob, because you have so many things that are going on, and these threads go through them. But one of the things I want to jump back to quickly is your alliance or your statewide organization, a membership organization. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right.
It's for all of the nonprofits that can kind of get together and join in. And I'd love to ask you the question about how they're networking, how they're sharing information. I mean, your state is so diverse, and physically, you have remote places, you have culturally different places. How is that networking or that ability for them to kind of communicate and see what other people are doing? How's that going?
Well, it's a good question. Yeah, so we do have a membership. It's a membership-driven organization, and the UNA, or Utah Nonprofits Association, has done a great job, again, with social media. Their website, we've really invested in that the last couple of years. And then we ironically, right before COVID, not knowing COVID, of course, was coming, we invested in a really good video conferencing setup, basically, so that we could extend, like you said, we have some rural parts of Utah. It's a very interesting state. So we have people way down in what's called St. George, and they have people up near Vernal. And so we have people that are far away. And so that has really allowed us to be a statewide organization through our Zoom conferencing.
That's great. Yeah.
So yeah,
and
so it's
thank
been
you,
fun.
Rob. This has been so amazing. I look forward to continuing to watch your success and just how everything continues to reimagine. Would love to remind everyone to definitely check out Rob's leadership podcast. So you can find that. Julie, I'm seeing your desktop screen, not the slide deck.
You're not. Okay.
Yeah.
You know,
okay.
I apologize for this, everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. Do check out the Nonprofit Leadership Podcast. I've had a great opportunity being one of your guests. It's been quite a while, so I'm sure you've been able to record so many others. And do check out the organization, Christian Center of Park City, celebrating their 20th year. I just love everything you do. So again, Rob, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and all of your excitement for the sector and your Utah community with us today. Yeah, I've been joined by, thank you, co-host Julia Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, where you're seeing a little bit of behind the scenes of her office there. So lucky us, we even got to see her desktop. So that was pretty cool. But I'm Jarrett Ransom, also known as the Nonprofit Nerd and CEO of the Raven Group. Want to say thanks again to all of our amazing presenting sponsors. But this has been wonderful. Thanks for spending your day with us. Today is Tuesday. I had to check to make sure. It's just a week, right? It's a little crazy, but this has been another episode of the Nonprofit Show. Rob, thank you again. I'm just so grateful that we're able to stay connected, and I hope that everyone will join us tomorrow for another episode of the Nonprofit Show. Have a great day. As we end, as we always do, stay well so you can do well. See you tomorrow.